This is Deb Amlen for the New York Times, and welcome to Wordplay. I'm here today with Arika Okrent, author and linguist, and she has a book that's about to drop on July 1st called Highly Irregular: Why Tough, Through, and Dough Don't Rhyme. Welcome, Arika.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Now, you are also the author of In the Land of Invented Languages, and you contribute to one of my favorite magazines, Mental Floss, with the illustrator Sean O'Neill, who also illustrated your book.
Yes, yeah, it was great to work with him, and it's nice to have words and pictures.
It's lovely. It's really almost like a graphic novel, the way it's set up. One of the things I did notice about the book is that it's all about blame. Pointing fingers, quibbling, admonishing, discommending, which I actually thought was hilarious. So why that format?
Well, it's starting from the standpoint of this frustration with English. And people joke about this, send memes about it, complain about it, like, oh my God, English, what are you doing? Why are you like this? Why don't tough, through, and dough rhymes? Why can you say this won't take long, but not this will take long? Why does it have all these things and the spelling is a mess? And you get to this point of just pure frustration with English. And so we wanted to sort of say, well, who did this to us? Like, who made it this way? Who do we blame for the mess we're in? And that became the structure of the book. And it's pretty convenient because if you do that, you end up with a history of English. Sort of, how did this happen? Who is to blame? Tells you the history of the language. So it can be read that way too, as a history.
It was a terrific and very funny format for a book. You start out by introducing us, or rather blaming, a Dutch man named Nolst Trinité for this obsession with the oddities of the English language. How did Nolst wind up being the arbiter of the English language? And was he just a complainer, or did he have something else in mind?
He's not a big important historical figure. He came to the attention of a certain group of spelling reformers because he is responsible for this very famous poem called The Chaos, which is a long, like something like 250 lines complaining about all the spelling tricky things of English. And he's coming from the standpoint of being an English learner. He was Dutch, and English was not his native language. He did learn English, he spoke English, and he was, of his time, the sort of newspaper language peever of his day, where he would complain about Dutch too, and how the kids these days are ruining the language and making all these mistakes. But he turned his attention to English and wrote a book about how to perfect your English pronunciation. And the biggest stumbling block is the spelling system. And he listed out all these terrible, irregular, frustrating things. And he was only discovered after the poem had been circulating. Finally, the Simplified Spelling Society wanted to know, like, who actually wrote this poem, and discovered it was this Nolst Trinité, and he had a long success. The book was printed for years and years, always adding more and more lines to this poem about the frustrating nature of English. And, he had a point. English is really frustrating, especially for a foreign language learner, to do the spelling.
Well, so what are some of the languages that these oddities come from? Because I know we have a lot of loan words in English.
Yeah, we have a lot of loan words, but those mostly come late. Words like spaghetti has that GH in the middle, but it starts from the very beginning. The very oldest layer of the language is these Germanic barbarian tribes who took over the island.
No offense, right?
And laid down. Yeah. And we can blame them first. One of the biggest frustrations of English, the GH everywhere. And that doesn't stand. It doesn't ever stand for a G sound or an H sound.
Right.
What is that doing there? And it comes from those barbarians, because they had a speech sound, a ch, that we don't have anymore.
Right.
And that GH was initially meant to spell the ch, and it stuck while the sound faded away.
Right.
It's still there, hanging on, reminding us of those barbarian Germanic speakers.
How do you explain these weird rules to a person who's trying to get comfortable with English? Because you do answer a lot of the questions in the book.
Yeah, well, the answer usually has something to do with history, that either the language changed, but something didn't change. So so some piece stayed the same while the language changed around this, and
Mhm.
now it's stuck there. Or it's this part is consistent and then something changed. So it can either be a change off the base or a change leaving something else in place. But, not everything is because of that. Some is just because, like, the human way of using language. We like to
Right.
do things like, intensify when a word gets kinda stale, we come up with a way to intensify it, and then that can leave inconsistencies behind. Like the pairs, like, we have terrible and terrific. They both come from the same root.
Oh,
One is good, one is bad. And it just ended up that way because we like to use a dramatic sounding words to intensify emotions. So we started saying, that's terrific in a good way when it started as, terrific, like terror.
terrifying.
Yeah, that's what it yeah, terrify, terrific are the same word with one little change.
Wow.
But we like to grab those words to heighten our emotion and make freshen the language up.
So, what are your pet peeves? If you had to pick one oddity of the English language, what gets you?
Hmm. One of my peeves, and this is not really me peeving against people using language in a certain way, but the way that people have in history decided that these are going to be two words and they're going to be different, and you're going to have to remember which one's which for the rest
Right.
of your English speaking existence. So, the fact that travel and travail are the same word, and it was, in Johnson's dictionary, he decided, we'll spell it this way when we mean the hard work one, and we'll
Right.
spell it this way to mean the roaming around one. And those were together, like the traveling was a travail. Then you're going to have to keep track of which one's which. And then eventually you're going to pronounce the one that's spelled this way differently.
Right.
And it's up to you to remember it, keep track of it, spell it right for the rest of the language existence now that it's cemented that way. There's a lot of things like that that you don't even realize are weird until someone asks you. Someone who's a kid or a non-native speaker says, "Why does English do this?" And you say, "Well, you see," and you in your own mind, the logic crumbles as you're trying to explain it, and you realize, you know what? This is weird. This doesn't make sense at all. And
That's
that's
right.
how you end
That's
up at
right.
this point.
So, you want to hear my pet peeve?
Yeah, yeah.
I've
What's
been
your
waiting for this one. So, mine has to do with counting. When we get to the number 10,
Mhm.
we then start another series of 10, but instead of saying one teen, we say 11. What's up with that, Erica?
Yeah, that's a great peeve because usually when people say, "You know what my peeve about English is?" It's something that, like, other people are making mistakes on. But
Mm,
you're peeving at the language itself. Like, you're not saying, "People don't say this right." You're saying, "The language does not say this right."
right.
It should be more logical, and it's numbered. Like, numbers are logical, like, they're supposed to be
I
logical.
would think,
Um,
you
yeah.
try doing that in a Sudoku. Uh,
Yeah. Yeah,
Also,
it's consistent.
and this is a little on the gross side, but this is one I want to know about. Why don't we pronounce the G in phlegm? Why isn't it phlegm?
Mhm. Well, we used to not write it that way. When phlegm first
Yeah.
came into the language, it was spelled Fleme or something. It was more like flume, like it's
Oh,
flowing stuff. And it was phlegm, but it was borrowed from Latin, the same thing that gives us phlegmatic, where we do
right.
say the G, right? If it's separated in syllables, it's phlegmatic. But phlegm, which comes from that same root, was the G was put in later to be fancy. So we didn't used to spell it with the G, and then in the 16th, 17th century, people started looking at words that had classical language connections and sticking the classical language connection back into the spelling, but not changing the pronunciation. So it really is unnecessary, but we stuck it back in to match it. Like, yes, look, this goes with phlegmatic. If you have too much phlegm, you're phlegmatic, and the humors and all of that. You can see on the page that connection, even though we don't have it in speech.
Right, right. So if I wanted to go around using the word phlegm, I could just tell people I'm being fancy when they look at me funny?
Well, yeah, that putting stuff into pronunciation has never really been the way, because putting it in writing and using it in writing is a specialized skill where you can show off your specialized knowledge. Yeah, it's more fancy to put it in a book.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, so how are people who are not native English speakers supposed to make sense of all this?
People learn English really well. Like, so many people who didn't grow up with English speak it great. They speak it wonderfully. It's not impossible to learn. And I think the success comes from kind of relaxing about the trying to figure out why. Like, give me the rule, and I'll learn the rule, and then I'll know how to do it. You just have to give up on learning. There's not a rule. You got to learn it by hearing it over and over again, or seeing it over and over again. And the more exposure you have, it'll just absorb and sink in. And that's not comforting to everybody and everybody's style of learning, but it works. People learn to read, people learn English from all places. And it's not the hardest one to learn. There are spelling systems and languages that are much harder to learn for an English speaker or for a European language speakers. You can do it, but you got to relax about the why. But if you want to know the why, you can read this book. Yeah.
Arika Okrent, I want to thank you so much for being with us today. Arika Okrent's book is available July 1st. And thank you very much for this wonderful addition to the lexicon.
Thank you for having me. This was fun.